And we've got that live stream happening too.
All right, shall we hit the start?
Still setting up. Hang on one second.
Okay,
On YouTube.
well, we can let them in while that
Yeah,
happens.
we can let them in.
I'm letting
Sure.
them in. Here
Start.
they come.
All right. It's time.
Hello, folks.
Hey, everybody. Zoom. Attendees. We have a lot of people to pack in here today.
Fortunately, there's always room in Zoom.
Indeed. Indeed. Keep coming. We're up to a bunch of y'all.
Hello, hello, hello.
Hello.
So I'll start with the intro. You're going to spiel, then I'll talk, then I'll disappear, and Carly. Okay, we have this organized.
Okay.
So, contrary to appearances. So this is live at the Loom, the second live at the Loom for the Stash Weave Along. And you can see that once again, neither one of us is at our looms, but we are doing weaving adjacent activities related to our stash projects. I'm starting up here at my laptop so I can talk through some plans I made, and then I'm going to dash downstairs to my warping board where I will be winding a warp today. And Carly is working on something related to her stash project too that she will explain in a bit. So Dawn's going to spiel, and then we will do our thing.
Perfect. So spiel away. This will take your questions. Use the Q&A interface, please. It's at the bottom of your screen if you're on a desktop or laptop, somewhere else if you're on a device. You can use chat to chat. You can turn on closed captions for yourself. Let me make sure I have that turned on, and I do. You can also turn on a full transcript, which instead of just scrolling across the bottom of your screen, you can see all the words and you don't have to miss what just scrolled across. So you can do that. We are recording. The quick and dirty recording will be up right after we finish, and then we'll get an edited version up in a day or two. And I think that is my spiel, and I think I'm going to moderator space, and I will be trying to wrangle these two as they run around.
And there's 3 of me today.
Yes, there are. Here I go.
Okay, so I'm gonna talk about what I did in the week since the last live at the Loom, so that you know what it is I'm starting with when I get down to my warping board. So I'm gonna share my screen and show you some things. These are the yarns that I have decided to work with. This one is a 50-50 cotton acrylic blend, turns out. I didn't realize there was acrylic in it last week when we were talking about it. These two are nearly 50-50. It's like 52 something, 47 something, cotton and rayon. And I really wanted to use this gold, but there's so little of it that I have decided not to use it, and I'm going to use this gold instead. And it doesn't show up very well in this picture, but this is like a knit tube, so it's stretchy and it's really sparkly. And my guess is that it is mostly viscose or something like that, viscose, but I'm not really sure. I have no label for it. This one, again, I have no label for it. I have a lot of balls of it, but no label for it. So I think it's mostly cotton, but the shiny bit that's in there might be rayon, might be viscose, something like that. And then this ecru, Patton's ecru DK that I have, I've got 4 balls of that. So it's going to be my background color. And as I was moving things around, I decided I liked things in these pairings. The gold beside the pink, so I decided I was going to do a fairly wide pink stripe with a little gold on either side. And I like the pink next to the multi, so I was going to do a fairly wide multi stripe with a little pink to either side. And I liked the copper next to the gold, so I was going to do a fairly wide gold stripe with a little copper to either side. That was my rough plan. I did weigh the balls that I weighed all the stuff that I had, and I calculated the length of the yarn on the ball, or for the full balls, I just wrote down what was on the label, the ball band, for what I could. but I don't know the information for the multi or the sparkle. My goal in working through this worksheet, which you'll find in the course, was to make sure I had enough of these things to do a warp that was, I'm thinking 10 to 14 inches wide, something like that. And I do have enough just from these, even if I leave out this chenille, which I have decided not to use. So these are the ones, this is the gold. I'm not going to use the sparkle. I'm sure I have at least that much. So I know I have enough. I'll be able to wind something that'll work. I won't know exactly how much, how wide, any of that until I get down to the warping board, but I'm confident that I'm not going to run out. And if I did run out, I could just throw in some more of the ones I have extra balls of. So to get these numbers, once again, I use this calculator that is also in the lesson in the Weave Along, the Warp Ends and Width calculator. So I'll go through that in more detail in the lecture this afternoon, but that's where these numbers came from. And based on looking at this and eyeballing things and looking at this and seeing how many ends I had, I came up with sort of a tentative plan for the order or which I was going to do the colors in. So like I said, gold on either side of that pink, which is called Bermuda, the label, the ball band says Bermuda, and I wanted to put the sparkle on either side of the copper, and I wanted to put the Bermuda, the pink, on either side of the multi. But I thought maybe I had better just check and make sure that those looked okay, so I stuck them in the draft editor. And I just made up stripe widths. I threw things in, and then at one point I realized my stripes were going to be really skinny and I wanted them to be wider than that, so I threw more in. But at this point I was really just checking the colors. Do I like the colors next to each other? And I got these colors from, let's see, from the image, and I used that to make up, let's see, this color palette, and then these are the colors that I use to make the stripes. This light one is the one I'm using for the multicolor because it's got a whole lot of colors in it, but it's really quite pale. So here is the picture of all of my yarns, and then those same yarns with all the saturation taken out, so all we see is the value of it. You can see the multicolor is very pale. It's close to the ecru. The darkest are the pink and the copper, but they're only a little bit darker than the sparkle or the gold, which is only a little bit darker than the ecru. So they're all very light in value, except for the pink and the copper stand out more. Okay, so going back over here, I played around with these stripes. I had them originally, remove ends, just like I described, with a few ends of the accent color on either side of the wider stripe. But I realized, I mean, that's fine, that's attractive, I'm very happy with that, but I decided it was a little more interesting if I put just one more end of the other color on the outside of each stripe. And that's partly because this gold sparkle and the ecru that's going to be the background is they're so close in value that they won't show up. You won't be able to see that there's a difference between them. So I added in these little dividing lines so things would stand out a little better. And I've also made a decision. Let's see, I think, oh, so let me go back here. These are those stripes. This is my stripe tracking worksheet. This is what I am taking down to my warping board. Here it is. Oh, with notes to remind myself that I'm doing this as a folded warp, so it's going to be twice as long, and it only needs to be half as wide, and I need to put a cross at both ends, and I'm working in the ballpark of 10 to 12 EPI. 10 would be an okay set for plain weave. 12 would be better for twill. Could go a little closer even, but some of these, the Bermuda is pretty thick. I think any closer than 12 would be pretty crammed in there for twill. And the sparkle is a little bit thicker as well. So last thing I wanted to say is that I'm gonna use a trick that's kind of halfway between the the two things I talked about in last Friday's blog post. In last Friday's blog post, I talked about how if you're going from front to back, you can wind all your colors in separate chains and then feed them through the reed where you want them. But that doesn't work very well if you're going from back to front, because you wind up with a whole lot of chains on different leaf sticks that you have to thread from. And it gets really cluttered and awkward if you have more than two sets of leaf sticks, but two is okay. So what I'm going to do is wind these stripes without the ecru. I'm not going to wind the ecru. I'm just going to wind these stripes in a chain. And then I'm going to wind another chain that is only the ecru. And then I can interleave those chains while I'm threading from back to front. So that means I can decide later exactly how wide I want everything to be, how many ends I'm going to put in between my colored bands, having already figured out how wide those colored bands are going to be. And it's an opportunity for me to show you that option for interleaving two chains together, which is a really cool thing to do, even if you're not doing a stash warp. So that was a whole lot of very fast words, but that is my plan that I'm going to run downstairs with, ta-da, this and my yarn, and I'm headed to my warping board. And I'm going to go off screen, and Carly can tell you what she's working on while I go downstairs and get my camera set up pointing at the warping board. I guess before I go, do we have any questions in the Q&A about that specifically? About what I've been talking about?
Nope, but would you stop? Oh, good, you stopped sharing. Perfect.
Okay, and you can, I'm going to turn off my video and
Yes, and I muted your iPad, so you'll have to unmute yourself.
okay. I'm gonna mute here. You can actually put this me on hold and kick me out.
Okay.
And if I have to come back upstairs, we'll figure it out.
Okay. Deal.
See you in a bit.
Okay, so now I'm unmuted. So is it my turn?
Yes.
Okay, so I should be warping. I decided on this color scheme last week. But I have an issue, which is like I don't actually have a loom. Plus, if I warp today, what would we be doing for 4 weeks? I would just be weaving, which is kind of a little bit boring to watch. So just a teaser for what's going on. I'm working on experimenting for the finishes class coming up. So that's occupying this loom for a little bit. So I realized though that I have more than a yarn stash. I also have fiber stash. And I was like, this is also a stash that I need to start working from. This is from a cashmere angora mohair. It's from a mohair goat that I purchased from Etsy. It's from South Dakota. Super cheap. It's like $10 for like a pound of like baby kid mohair. Clearly, like they didn't really take care. I mean, I think the animal's fed and happy and everything, but clearly they didn't like really know what they were doing. So the fiber is like super, super dirty. There's just, I skirted it. I threw out a whole ton of it when I was washing it. But I've just been slowly kind of working through it and learning how to process yarn with it. So today, while Janet's doing her warp, what I'm going to be doing is taking this mohair, blending it with some of this hand-dyed kind of mixed wool that I got from Dharma Trading Company. And they don't, it's just American wool. They don't really have a, a designation. It's probably just like a mix of different breeds. And trying to come up with, I'm engineering a yarn to work within my stash project for zinger stripes. So that's what I'm doing. So if anybody has questions on that process, I kind of don't know what I'm doing. I spin and I really like spinning, but mostly I am taking apart my fibers and teasing them out. I'm using these pretty crazy combs. And then I'm gonna weigh them and I'm gonna try to find the right proportion to this mix with this stuff. I did a little bit of an experiment last night where I made this stuff and then I have my spinning wheel here. Let's say hello. So this is my spinning wheel. This was actually my grandma's. But nobody ever used it. I'm the first person to use it in the family. Like she bought it thinking she would spin and then never did.
Oh, cool.
Yeah, but it's it's not super old. It's from like the early, probably late 1800s, I think. From Norway, and my family's Norwegian. I don't know, the whole thing. So I'll just spin a little bit of it and then test it and see, try to find the right proportion of what I'm doing. And I think, is
I
that
have a
it?
question for you. I have a
Yay!
question. Sheila Roberts wonders, how are you preparing your fiber for spinning? The drum carder?
Yes. Yeah, I've just borrowed this from the guild. So check your local guilds for stuff. I mean, I'm surprised by how much stuff I could just borrow instead of having to buy all this equipment. So, and it also gives me a due date. I have to give, oops, sorry, my camera's moving here. I have to have it turned in 30 days. So that means that I have to process as much as I can. So yeah, I'm still working with it. I'm probably going to use it a little bit wrong, but it made this stuff and I like it. It's
Looks
not,
good.
yeah, it's nice and fluffy. As long as it's easy to spin, it's all, I don't really have an end goal in my mind. I'm just going to try different processes until I get the kind of yarn that I like, and then hopefully be able to repeat that and get more of the yarn that I like. And then all the stuff I don't like can go into my stash project. So yeah, or if it's not exactly what I want. So yeah, I'm excited. I love making yarn. It's such an interesting process.
I agree.
Yeah, that's right, Don. You're a
I'm a
spinner too.
spinner. Yep.
I didn't mean to be a spinner. I didn't set out for it. I'm not really a spinner, but I do like doing it. It is very fun. So I have a camera on a thing with wheels and wheels keep wanting to move. There we go.
There we go.
All right.
All right, Janet, you ready? I don't have audio, Janet, on your iPhone.
Can you hear me now?
Yes, I
Yay!
can.
Okay. But I want to, can you spotlight the phone, which is this one?
Yes.
Okay.
If I can remember how. Spotlight for everyone. There we
Okay. Okay, there. I only want my audio to come from the iPad so that we don't get echoes. You can hear me okay?
Yep.
And you're seeing this one here.
I'm seeing your warping board. You're standing in front of your warping board.
Okay. Well, okay. I am in both pictures. So I have notes on here to remind me to tell you things and to remind me to do things. So first of all, I have on here, make sure that your guide string is not stretchy. That's always a good idea. But in this case in particular, when you're working with very limited quantities, like the end of a bobbin, and you're trying to squeak out every last end that you can, if your guide string is stretchy and you can pull it an extra couple of inches, that might mean you wind up with fewer ends. So extra attention to non-stretchy guide string. That's a reminder to myself as well, because I started making a guide string out of wool and then I realized, oop, that's probably not the best idea for this project. I have on here a little thing that's going to remind me how to go around the cross. And I've got one of those at both ends because I have to remember to make the cross at both ends for a folded warp. And I also have on here a reminder to start with a really big loop, not to tie it right onto this peg, but to make a big enough loop at the starting peg that I can put that easily around the apron rod. Because normally I would have continuous loops at the end that will go around the apron rod and discontinuous loops, not loops, at the other end. But in this case, I'm going to fold the warp and both ends, both crosses, are going to go on the apron rod. So I need to have continuous loops at both ends. And when I'm starting out, I can't make a continuous loop, but I can make a really big loop like that, that will be easy to put around the apron rod. So I'm going to start up here. I'm going to make a cross here. I'm going back and forth to get a 6-yard warp. And I'm making my other cross right here. I don't know if you can see down there. And come back again. But my plan is only for one end of copper. One end of copper is a pain to wind. It's fine, I can do it, but you know what? I'm gonna just make an executive decision to wind 2 ends of copper. Why not? Hopefully that doesn't make my copper stripe too skinny. Oops. And I want to go this way, which means that one. See, I already went through my cross the wrong direction. There we go. Now, I'm going to switch now from copper to the next color on my plan, which is sparkle. That is this one. And I'm going to put this on a stand so that it doesn't roll around too much. And again, because I want continuous loops up here, I don't want to tie to this peg. I want to tie the yarn, the old yarn, the copper yarn, to the new yarn, the sparkle yarn, so that I have a continuous loop where it's going to go around the apron rod. That's not a big deal. That's not necessary if you warp from front to back. But if you warp from back to front, you want continuous loops at both ends. So I'm already regretting my, no, I'm going to go with it. I'm going to keep the 2 ends of copper. So I'm going to cut this end, tie these 2 together. It doesn't matter if the knot is right at the peg, because this is all going to be loom waist at the back of the loom. So if the knots come forward from the back apron rod by 1 inch or 2, that's not a problem at all. I do want to be kind of paying attention. If this is super, super stretchy, I want there to be about the same amount of tension on this thread as on the other thread. So I might need to pull it a little harder or a little less to make that happen. And my goal now is for 3 ends of the sparkle. Whoops, I'm getting hooked up on my copper. One sec. Wouldn't you know? Jeez.
Real world stuff here.
There, got it loose. Alrighty. So 2. Now I will point out too, I hardly ever wind 1 end at a time. I usually wind 2 or 4 multiple ends at a time. But when I'm doing a stash warp, especially when I have no idea in advance, or I'm being very flexible and with how wide the stripes are going to be, or the number of ends, then in this case, I am winding 1 at a time. So there's 3 ends of my sparkle. So I need to cut this off and tie it to the next thing, which is my Bermuda. And I have a little bobbin that I made when I was trying to decide what order to put threads in. So I'm just going to put that bobbin in a shuttle to hold it while I wind from it so that it doesn't get too tangled up. And again, I need continuous loops, so I will tie the ends together. And I am just using an overhand knot to tie these together. So holding the 2 lengths together and tie them in an overhand knot. Nothing fancy. And I find I'm usually better able to get the knot close to the peg with an overhand knot than with some other kind.
Shannon, I have a request to minimize Carly's screen, but if I minimize Carly, we still have your iPad going. Which screen do I want to be looking at? Your iPad or your phone?
Well, I'm I wanted people to be able to see the phone long enough to see that I was making the cross at both ends. But now that you have, established, you should be aware now there's a cross happening down here as well. Then you can switch to just the iPad, and that I think should show you this area better rather than just my back the whole time.
Okay, yeah, I'm gonna do that.
Okay. Okay, so now I need to save enough yarn for, I'm planning on, my stripe plan that I worked out upstairs has got 6 ends of Bermuda, like 2 stripes that are 3 ends and 2 stripes that are 1 end, so like 8 ends of Bermuda. But I have a big old ball of it here too. And I have another ball. I have more balls of it if I need it. So I, for now, am just going to wind until I run out of stuff, see how far that goes. And then, oh, is it going to make it to the end? Oh, that is not going to make it. That is not close enough. Because that, if I put a knot there, that is, oh, wait, no. This is the back apron rod. There will be a certain amount that I can't weave at all. It'll certainly be, no, you know what? So here's what I'm trying to think through. If I put a knot right here, that will be at the, closest to the back apron rod, because this is the edge. This is the end of my warp. So this will be in the loom waist, but chances are it'll be in the part of the loom waist that I want to be my fringe, and I don't want to have a knot in my fringe. If this were a yarn I had very little of, I might risk it, and then maybe I'd have to stop weaving an inch or two earlier to give myself enough length for fringe. But I have a lot of this pinky stuff, so I am going to take that back off. I would be happier with a knot in the middle somewhere, because then I could just splice the ends in the fabric. I don't want a knot up in the fringe though, because that'd be obvious. And there isn't a way to splice ends together in the fringe. But since I am not running short, I'm just going to come back to the end, cut this, and start a new end of Bermuda. But I am going to take the remains of this Bermuda. My iPad does this thing where it's trying to, it's automatically repositioning the camera angle to try to get the action on camera. I hope that's not disturbing, because it's not something I can control. So I'm saving this last little bit of the pink, which was the length not long enough to get to the other end and make another end in the chain, in case I have a broken thread or I need to make a repair, or for whatever reason I might want that last little bit. And you can see here I did the same thing with the scarf that I did when I was writing the course. Those are all the little ends of those yarns. Okay, more Bermuda. Here's the end. So I'm just going to wind for a little while following my plan. And if I have to deviate from the plan, I will make a note on my tracking sheet of how many ends I actually got. And you may have seen in the picture that for this Bermuda stripe, I just had said 12 or more ends, at least 12 ends. See, there's a knot. I'm just going to leave that in because I can fix it while I'm weaving. It's not going to be in the fringe, so I can deal with it on the loom.
Janet, Brenda's got a question. She says she's a totally front to back warper. If that knot was going to be in your fringe, please explain that again. What does that mean?
So when you're weaving, whatever's, the last 15, 20 inches or so, you cannot weave. That's loom waist. But if you're doing a scarf that's going to have, 6 or 7 inches worth of fringe, part of that 20 inches, 15 to 20 inches of loom waist will become your fringe. And so I was just kind of eyeballing here saying, okay, well, this is probably about my loom waist. So if I can't weave any further than this, then I might want the next 7, 8 inches or so to be fringe. So if there's a knot in that section, there would be a knot in my fringe. And I don't want that. If you were doing something like a towel where that's not going to have fringe, then you don't have to worry about that. But I'm making a scarf or a wide, either a very narrow shawl or a wide scarf, however you want to think about it. So I do need to consider where the knots are going to fall. That little bit of logic doesn't actually change depending on whether you warp from back to front or front to back.
So her follow-on is, so it goes on last. No, you don't use that string at all if it's not long enough, right?
So the one that I decided not to use it, I took it off entirely. It's not even part of my warp. But if I had left it in there, if I had been warping front to back, and this was my cross, because both ends are my cross, this end would first go through the reed, and then it would go through the heddles, and then it would get tied onto the back apron rod. When I'm warping from back to front, I skip the reed and I skip the heddles to begin with. I just attach it to the back apron rod. But in either case, this, what's close to the cross and close to the ends of the warp, is the ends of the warp, both ends are going to go around or be tied to or just loop around the back apron rod and will be the loom waist at the end of the project. Since I'm doing this as a folded warp, which means I'm going to take the two ends and fold them together somewhere in the middle, somewhere about 3 yards down. So that's 1, 2, 3, somewhere around here. Oh, good heavens, camera. This is actually the middle of my warp, which will be, when I cut it, this will be the part that's at the front of the loom. So my fringe at the start of the project.
Laura is wondering, how do you fix the knot in the warp during the weaving, or will you cover that in one of the later live at the looms?
I will, if I run across a warp, a knot while I'm weaving, I will certainly talk about that and how I deal with it. But briefly, I treat it like a broken warp end, pretty much. I will cut the knot and either pull a new warp end through the heddle and through the reed and pin it to the fabric at the front and weight it off the back and weave for a little while. And often if it's a knot and it hasn't come apart on its own, I do that before I actually cut the warp. So I have two ends traveling together and they kind of make an automatic overlap where the ends join. But this is pretty heavy stuff. That might show. So I'm not sure if I would do that in this case. But at any rate, I substitute a new end or attach a new piece of yarn where that knot is. Very much like if it's a broken warp end.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm. So I haven't counted to see how many of these I have. I should do that shortly, and I can count at either end. Let's see, where did I first attach this? I think I first attached it down here, which means I'll have an even number when I'm down here. So I'm going to count at one of my crosses, and this one's easier to reach. So I've got 2, 4, 6, 8, 10. I want to have at least 12. I'd like to have more than that so that I get a wider stripe. And I still have a good bit of stuff here to get my last 8 ends out of. So I'm just going to keep going. So this will be 12 now, which is my minimum for this stripe. And I'll go one more. Now this pink is heavier than the other stuff. So I'm entertaining the option of not slaying it at the same 12 EPI as the rest. but we'll see. Okay, if I keep going, even as it is now, I don't think I'm going to get 8 ends out of that. So I think I'll do one more pass, and then I'll have to crack a new ball to get the stripes for the rest of my other stripes, the accents on the edges of my other stripes, unless I decide to do something different. Okay, there. Oh yeah, see, look, just right at the end. So I'm gonna scissors. Actually, I'm gonna anchor this. That means from that ball, assuming that was a full ball and it had the ball band on it, but that doesn't necessarily mean anything. I was able to get 2, 4, 6, 8, 10, 12, 14, 16 ends. 16 ends that were twice as long as I had planned on. And my worksheet here, I had assumed I was going to get, oh, look, 31 safe ends. Well, divide that in half because I'm making them twice as long. That's 15 and a half. And I got 16. Oh, so I was right on target in that respect. But it means that my plan uses more than the 31 ends that I thought I could get, which is why I have to use a new ball. So this is why you either need to be flexible or you need to stick to your numbers when you're making stuff up as you go. Fortunately, I have the extra balls, so I'll be okay. So now I'm going to go back to the sparkle, and then I'll go back to the copper, and then I'll wind my next set of stripes, doing much the same thing. So what time are we at?
We are at 3:36.
Okay, so if Carly has stuff to talk about, we can switch to Carly. I'm going to keep winding. Maybe you can keep me on screen, and then if people have questions about what I'm doing, they can just chime in. Or if you have questions now, by all means, chime
I have
in.
one question for you right now.
Okay.
Do you use a chain thread as a counter as you wind the warp?
I do if I don't have a lot of frequent color changes. But when I have a lot of frequent color changes and I'm counting each color change and I'm recording that, then I don't need another way of counting because the color changes are basically doing the same thing already.
Great. All right, let's see what Carly's up to. I'm going to spotlight her for a minute. Ready, Carly?
Yeah. So
Here we
I
go.
just got done doing this experiment, which it looks so good compared to what we started with, which is like this matted ball
Yeah.
and whatnot, right? This thing's amazing. I usually hand card, and this is awesome. So this is 50-50, and I basically just kept blending it until it magically started to align, which is really awesome. So now I've got my spinning wheel, and I'm just gonna see how it spins. Let's see, let's jump right into it. So this is just an old double drive, so there's not a lot of adjustments I can make on it. It's just I only have two gears. I think it was mostly just to make weaving yarn or knitting yarn for sweaters. So I just spun a little bit. Then what I'm gonna do is I'm actually gonna pull it out, which helps me make sure that it's nice and strong. So I'm gonna use this in my warp. And I also am gonna apply it because yeah, just for more strength. Like that's gonna be good for, oh, that would have been good for warp if it didn't do that. Is it a single
you-
treadle?
You
Yeah.
folded it back on itself to ply it.
Yeah, just to
Yeah.
see how let's see if I could, oh, where's my camera? There we go.
Right there.
Yeah. So it's nice and lumpy. So I might spin it, I think I might spin it just a little bit finer to add to the strength. What I wanted to do though, where's my, thing. I'm looking for my brush. I have this wire brush. It's just kind of heavy, probably a little bit more heavy duty than I want, but I want to brush it because I want that mohair to create this halo. So that's what I'm trying to find. I'm trying to find the perfect amount of mohair to wool so that way I could get kind of like this nice haloed yarn. So
Cool.
not bad. I think it could be definitely be better. Definitely if I spin it a little bit more. Let's try that. So I was trying, sorry.
No, go ahead.
So he says how many twists per inch? Well, like all things, what I tend to do is I just start spinning and I start seeing kind of how I naturally want to spin, because if it's something that my body can remember, I'm more likely to just kind of repeat that motion. And it also depends on my materials, what my materials want to do. So once I get like a yarn I like, then I'll look at how many twists per inch I'm doing. I don't know, Don, you're a spinner. What do you do?
Oh, it depends on what I'm making. I mean, it really is twist per inch is, if you're making a big fat yarn, you might not need so many twists. If you're making something
Yeah.
for weaving, you might like a lot of twists. I can't say I've paid a lot of attention in my spinning career to twist per inch. I just make yarn that I like. I have a question for you though, Carly. She's got Carol has some bulky yarn that she'd like to use as warp. She doesn't think it'll fit through the heddles on her floor loom, or if it does, she's concerned about abrasion. It should be okay on a rigid heddle if it fits through the slots, right?
Yeah, it's the perfect uh what's the word I'm trying to think of? Yeah. It's kind of the benefit of a rigid heddle. It's good for those kinds of things where you don't want to have so much abrasion. And definitely you're right, put it through the slots instead of the eyes, because the eye thread is going to get quite a bit of abrasion. Um, but yeah, I think that would be awesome.
Cool.
All right. So here's another little, okay, this is looking good. Yeah, so there's another one. A little bit more even. I'm getting there. It usually takes me like 100 grams before I know what I'm doing. And then the last 100 is like, oh, no, this is what I wanted the whole time. But yeah, I don't know. I'm wondering, should I try a version that has more mohair or less? So maybe I'll wind this out. I've got some more fluff, but I've got my scale. So I'm doing it in 10-gram chunks. Oh
Yeah.
yeah. So Sonia says she usually spends based on crimps per inch of the fleece. So you're a real spinner. Still just learning. Um, yeah, I taught myself how to spin. Well, I didn't really teach myself. I learned through books. In the 90s because art yarn was so expensive. I mean, it still is pricey, but like it was $20 a skein in 1995 money, and I was a high school student making $8 an hour as a dishwasher. So buying nice yarn was kind of out of my league. So I would go to this fiber store in Seattle, and I think it's gone, sadly, or maybe it moved. And I would go and buy a fleece, and I got some books, and I had my spindle, and I was like, well, I can make my own yarn. But I never felt like I was a real spinner. I felt like I didn't know what I was doing, so I'd never seen anybody do it before. The internet is amazing to learn this stuff. So this is going between 2 and 3. And it's also more of like a meditative process. I think it's just really good for your brain. So this is about 2 of this. I'm going to try one where I do 2 ounces of this and then maybe 7 or 8 ounces of my wool. And Sonia says doing your own thing is good too. Thanks, Sonia. Let's see. So maybe I'll do, well, no, I don't want to do that color part yet. So I am not sure if this is interesting to people or not. And I'm not sure exactly what to say. Do we want to switch back to Janet and see
Let's
what
check in with Janet.
we could start just she and I could chit chat about certain things?
How you doing, Janet?
I am doing okay. I'm up to my multi-stripe, and this is the first time I've had the multi like out of the ball, so I could see how close, or in this case, how far apart the slubs are. And it's looking to me like I'm thinking maybe, well, yeah, 12 is probably okay for a set. 14 wouldn't be bad because it's got some finer spots, but then I want to leave room for the thicky slab parts. I still have to decide, am I doing twill or am I doing plain weave? And yeah, I'm not just I haven't decided that yet. This is also going to be when I really find out how far the how much yardage is on the ball, because remember, I have no labeling at all on these balls. They're just bare in the bag. Here's a great big old knot. I am going to go back to the end of this one since I have lots of this yarn. And I'm going to take that knot out. So to take the knot out, I cut near the end peg, leaving enough length there that I can tie with. And then I, go past the knot and I'll cut there again. So there's a bit of yarn I can't use, and it's so short, I'm just going to put it right in the garbage. If it were the very last bit of this yarn that I had and I needed it in case I broke a warp thread, then I wouldn't throw it in the garbage, but I've got a bunch of balls of it. So that goes in the garbage so it doesn't get tangled up. And now I'm going to tie. Going to keep dropping. Keep stepping on the yarn. That's the problem. What I didn't get was something to put balls of yarn in so that they wouldn't roll around all over my floor. So this ball of yarn is somewhere over there now. So I'm going to tie these two together so that the join is right close to the peg, which means it'll be in the loom waist. And then I'll keep going.
Okay, we have a question to see Carly's spinning wheel. Carly, when you next get to your wheel, we didn't see you spinning. We could just see your upper
Oh, okay.
body.
Well, I'll move the computer screen over. And I do
Okay, when you're ready. Janet, we're back to you for a minute. We also have Diane Bloom says the other way you can get a halo on your yarn is be rough with it in the finishing process. Wash in very warm water with a little soap, Eucaline or power scour, use a potato masher or plunger to agitate the yarn. Have an ice bath handy and go from hot to cold several times and continue to agitate in hot water. When you're done, snap the yarn. After getting most of the water out, snap it and then thwack it.
Awesome. That is thank you so much. I love wet finishing yarn. I just like wet finishing things in general. I think it's my favorite part of the process. But that's awesome. So basically I'm using detergent, and then I'm going from hot to cold and hot to cold. I'm doing lots of agitation. So I'm kind of getting almost a felting process happening at the same time as I'm pulling up those fibers, maybe.
Could be.
Yeah. Once I get kind of a mix that I like, I'll do a couple of samples and then see which one I want. And this is also kind of a mystery.
So I don't know if you can see how my stripes are shaping up here. Remember, I'm winding stripes without the ecru, and that's what they look like so far.
Right?
Yeah, I think they're kind of pretty.
Yeah.
Sorry, cords and cables. I forgot everything was sort of precariously arranged there.
Who's got questions?
I forgot, Janet, how many ends per inch are you doing for your?
Tentatively thinking about 12 EPI.
Yeah.
At least in most stripes. I might massage that a little bit based on the thickness of the specific yarns, but I might also just go with it. And then the ones that are thicker, like the pink, will just be denser, heavier stripes. And the ones that are thinner, like the multi, will be looser and more open, those stripes. And that'll just add some texture to the scarf, and that's fine.
Oh, that's awesome. Are you gonna make those decisions when you get on the loom then?
Probably. I usually make the decisions as late as possible.
Yes.
Let's see. I've been filling in my little sheet here according to how many ends I actually got in each stripe, so that when I go back to the draft editor later, I can adjust my stripe widths and make them match, and then decide exactly how many ends of the ecru I want to insert and where.
Oh, okay.
So I think I counted and then I talked and forgot immediately what number was in my head. 2, 4, 6, 8, 10, 12, 14, 16. So I did 16 of the multi because I also had 16 of the Bermuda in the first time. I don't know that one thing that happens whenever I like that I took my colors into the draft editor and I started planning things out a little bit just to see what they'd look like. And whenever I do plan like that, things tend to wind up kind of consistent, all stripes the same width, a lot of repetition, rather than just being really organic and kind of random. And I miss the randomness sometimes, but that's just what happens when I choose to design that way. Anyhow, back to the Bermuda for 3 more ends.
All right, I've got some questions here. I'm gonna put you guys side by side. How about that?
Okay.
If I can. Remove spotlight. There you are, you're side by side. Okay. Courtney Nicholson is when wet finishing, if you're handling your skeins of handspun roughly as you described, how do you keep the strands from felting together?
So that one isn't, that was from a recommendation from another watcher. So I'm just gonna guess. I think that part of it is trying to get it to actually felt a little bit. That is actually, it is a way of wet finishing is to, have agitation and have those plies fuse together. So it's just one of the decisions that you make when you go into wet finishing. I typically just look at it and swing it around a lot, but
what about keeping the strands separate, not just the plies, but keeping the strands separate?
yeah, I think you just do it just enough. Like you don't, felting oftentimes happens slowly. Like if you've ever tried to get something to felt, it's amazing how much work it could take for some things to actually felt. So I think it's about controlling the process and making sure you don't overdo it. But that's my guess. Like, I don't know if you've ever woven anything 100% wool and you've tried to get it to fell down a little bit. Sometimes it's surprising. Some yarns actually won't felt at all. Some wools won't felt. And I don't know. I think that that's how you keep the whole thing from just ending up as a big potato.
Diane Bloom says, make sure you do your finishing in a lot of water in all caps so the yarn has room
Okay.
to move. Yeah.
All right.
Beth from Wyoming says, Carly, I love that you're using equal amounts of each color and fiber. It makes for an even yarn. Thank you for showing your process. It's a lost art.
I just lost my thing I was working on.
Uh-oh. Stuck in front of the drum carter?
Is it what?
Is it stuck in the front of the drum carter?
No.
No.
Hold it off and then So this is a note to me that I should just keep all the fiber off of my table. Move this over.
Um,
Boom. Okay.
Carly, we have another question for you, or a suggestion. If you have two combs and a way to attach one to the table, it would be a great help not to get hurt and speed up your process.
That is, I have this that I got from the what is it? The Weavers Guild. So I thought, I could put this on the table, right? And then you put your fiber in there and then you pull it off with the combs. I just don't have the clamps that I needed for this. So I was just trying to be very careful. Yeah, those combs are really, they're dangerous. They hurt. So I'm just trying to go kind of slow, make sure not really getting, making sure I have control over the combs. It reminds me of whittling a little bit, like whittling wood. This is so bizarre. I don't know what happened to the little thing I was working with. Because this is not it. This is too much. Maybe it did go under. Or maybe actually it's still on my comb. It's on here. I didn't pull it off. Okay. Let's pull this thing off.
Diane Keene says C-clamps from a hardware store work.
Thank you. I know I've got some around here, but I just I couldn't find them in time for getting the Zoom all set up. I just have so many projects going on.
Making sure I didn't miss anything. No, let's see. Do we have a question? Oh, yeah, we still want to see your spinning wheel.
Okay, I'm gonna do this one more time. This is really cool. There's like stripes of the mohair in it, which is kind of cool. Maybe I'll just spin it like this. We'll see. It's not as aligned or mixed, but okay, let me move the dog. I also have to be careful because Sal really likes to chase after these. They're like little
Oh, that's gorgeous. We can see it.
Okay, cool. I'm just gonna try to get like an angle going. Is that it? Yeah. There we go. So for anybody who doesn't know what a double drive, no, shush, you gotta stay here. Double drive spinning wheel is, this is just one continuous cord that goes around the wheel, and one goes onto the bobbin and one goes onto the spinner thing. And depending on how much pressure I put onto the wool, it will twist it. Then when I let it go, it will zoom back on. So I really only have two choices here. I have this gear, and then I have another little gear right in the middle, and that's it. So the more modern spinning wheels, you can fine tune those things to spin all kinds of yarns. Which is why people end up with so many spinning wheels. How many spinning wheels do you have, Dawn?
Oh, I only have one. And I have a small collection of spindles, but it's one spinning wheel.
Spindles are fun. That's what I buy when we travel. I try to find a yarn shop and I buy a little spindle.
Yep, or a little yarn or a little roving or something fun like that. How you doing, Janet?
I am good. I have made at the warping board design change. I realized as I was looking at my list that I'm mostly seeing just a blank black box where you would be if your camera was on. I don't know if that's what other people are seeing, if they're seeing me.
We're seeing you, I think.
Okay. So I realized as I was working through here that I only had one multi-stripe in, and I wanted more of the multi. So I have, and the multi and the sparkle are really close in color and shine. So I am substituting multi in for the sparkle in my last sparkle stripe.
Nifty.
So that is where I am at the moment.
All right,
I'm
well,
almost done winding, or close to.
that was fast.
Well, I say that I have one more stripe to go, and then remember I still have to do the ecru chain. Though
All right.
I'm looking at these stripes and I'm quite liking them even just without the ecru, and I'm wondering about leaving them out in the end after all. So I can still decide that at a later time. Let's see. This is now my wide copper stripe, and this is where I'm just going to use up the copper, all that I have, however far it goes. I need to get all my other yarns out of the way so they don't tangle up.
What do you think, Carly?
That
That looks
I
nice.
like it more than I thought I would.
Looks great.
Thanks. So now I'll do the opposite. So this one was about 2 grams. Somebody said I said ounces before. So this is about 2 grams of the mohair with 8 grams of the wool. So I'm gonna go ahead and just sort of put this little tuft away. So now I've got this one and this one, and now I'll do another one that's the opposite. So it's gonna have more of the mohair. Let's get more of this and less of, here, I'll move it up. And then less of that one. So then I can see the extremes. And then what I'll do is I will spin up the full little 10-gram bundles. Maybe do a couple more tests to make sure that I like the twist on it. And then I'll try different finishing processes with them. And then I could keep them as a, for reference, or I could use them in my project. It's
Great.
awesome. Yeah.
Well, guess what?
What?
We're at an hour.
Oh,
No way.
Yeah, I have a question from Diane who says, so on the left side of your wheel, Carly, there's a peg that holds a wooden screw that adjusts your tension. You need to pull the peg out and twist the handle of the big screw. It moves the maiden closer or farther away from the drive wheel. Higher tension, moving the maiden farther away from the drive wheel makes it easier to spin thinner.
Yes, I know that this screw exists. It doesn't work. I don't know. I just push it to where I need it to go. I haven't been able to make moving this. I think this is the one you're talking about. It's this little thing right there. So it took me a while to finally get the wheel set up, but I finally just moved it to the place where I'm able to spin, and then I'm like, okay, I'm just gonna leave it there. But yeah, I know that thing exists. It just, if I move it, it doesn't actually move this. I don't know. So there's, if you notice, like I'm using a washer and a zip tie because the leather strap broke. There's a lot of things I need to get fixed on it. I was gonna send it to or send this part to a repair place, but I keep using it. So I'm like, well, I'd have to get a second wheel. But
All right, does anybody have any last questions? We're at time. No more questions? So I guess we'll see you soon. Is it next
Okay.
Sunday we'll be back?
Next Sunday we'll be back. I will be folding my warp and putting it on my loom. And if I've decided to do the ecru chain, I will have it on a separate set of leaf sticks so that I beam them together and then I can interleave them.
awesome. And I'll be warping my loom. So that way we're warping at the same time, which I think would be cool.
Yes.
And it'll be like a race. We'll see.
Yeah, we know who's gonna win.
Yeah, until we start weaving.
Yeah.
Carly, Beth from Wyoming says weaving with hand spun celebrates the yarn. I agree. Totally.
Yeah, me too.
All right, everyone. Till next time. We'll see you soon.
See you soon. Thanks so much.
See some of you in the live lecture in an hour.
In an hour.
Yeah.
Really soon.
really soon.
Okay.
Oh, my dog's
Bye.
eating a bowl. No, come here.
Oh, we'll get a
Bye.
dog. Up. We need a
Uh,
dog. Oh, an animal sings us out. Does he have fiber in his mouth? Sal.
Yes.
Sal.
Yeah.
He's a cutie.
He's such a goodie.